recording this part so that those who are absent can catch up in any way. So those of you in class, I gave you a whole variety of Sharpies, crayons, and colored pencils. And to get started, what we're going to do is we're just kind of think about, get out these supplies. We're going to put the paint to the side for right now. And kind of what colors, the question of what colors do I connect to? This is a great spot to kind of look and see what colors are you connecting to. So bringing out your colors and really seeing which ones are you driven to. And why, kind of think like, why am I driven to these colors and which ones? And you can we're going to start with using our drawing tools that we have, and then we'll do paint in a second. So pick either one of these and start by just picking a color that you're driven to. And we'll just start by getting some lines. And you're kind of thinking about, while you're drawing, you're going to think about your other question is what's that something that you're holding on to? You can write words down if you want, or you can keep it all just drawings too. Or you can write a word and then use some color to get rid of it. And at the beginning, you want to use a variety of supplies too. So really kind of get some different line works in here. Yep, you're not thinking about what you're drawing. You're just kind of starting to do different patterns, shapes, textures. And while just kind of thinking about maybe, some of the questions and what brought that up today. Things that are supported in your life, things that you're holding on to. Get a Sharpie out. You're going to just start filling in different spaces. Yep, just kind of think about like your feelings and thinking about like what colors you're driven to, and thinking about what's going through your head while you're just drawing. And really fill the page. You can see I kind of focus center here. I need to get some things over here. Maybe I start to put a little more energy in my work. Really get some energy going in my work. So, using different pressures, drawing tiny and small, drawing really big, small, just go back and forth between those different feelings. And what happens, like I had a real strong color palette of purples and blues and reds, and now I'm just popping in a green, what does that kind of, what kind of do I feel like when I see that green pop in? So kind of taking something opposite, maybe something that you wouldn't maybe go towards. A color maybe you don't tend to always grab, maybe try to gravitate yourself towards it.
Okay, so you can just continue working, adding lines, texture, and pattern throughout. Remember to fill up your page. So really get your page really full. And just kind of finish that up, take the next little bit, and we'll grab some paint next.
All right, so really kind of after you got your paper really just covered, and again, we're not really like thinking about objects or really creating something that these classes, we're not going to focus on creating things that are realistic or, you know, it's really about just kind of that abstract piece where you're letting go of the end result and you're just staying present in the idea of creating. So now that you've kind of just warmed up with getting some creations down, we're going to start to use our paint. So if you have watercolor, you can use watercolor at home. If you're using tempera or acrylic, we're using tempera in class. If you're not using paint, you're just going to keep layering on top of your drawing. So just keep putting over the top with whatever you're using. Just keep going over the top. But those of you that have paint, I want to really have you guys really focus on mixing. So I gave a lot of primaries for my students in class and really kind of start to really kind of make sure that you're using colors by mixing the different colors. So again, what colors are you being drawn to? And then you're just going to go right over your drawing with some paint. And you're really just going to start kind of seeing where you kind of want to start to add your paint and the color that you want. You know, where do you feel like a good color would come in? Again, remember when you're working too, like work all the way through. Be careful not to just work in one spot. Make sure that you're working throughout this piece. And I just had red on my finger, which is totally fine, because I can just make that a happy accident. So I'm going to just continue some color mixing. And another one too is add a color maybe that's opposite that you wouldn't think to add. Like I got this gorgeous dark blue with adding my black and my blue together. But what happens if I add a little orange into that color? I get this brown. It's a nice looking brown there. So some real deep colors, and maybe I wouldn't have gone to this deeper, darker side of a color. And you can go right over your drawing. It's okay to let go of you're kind of letting go of what's behind that and just adding a new layer right on top. I gave you all students an extra palette because I know you'll probably need more color mixing space. And what happens if I put like a really light color next to that dark color? What happens if I just go right through all of those colors with a nice sweeping stroke? So think about adding shapes. I personally like to just continue mixing off of my colors that I make. So you can put some shapes down. You can do lines with your paint. Again, we're not looking to do, it's fun too how you can see right through some paint. So I can see right through. I can scratch back out. I want a little texture in my piece. You can even just mix right on your paper. So you'll start to think like, where do I want maybe to have things that are exposed, that the work that I did? Do I not want to paint over certain spots? Do I want to paint completely over everything? But again, really try to work on those color mixing. So really kind of get it so that you're not just using the pure color right out of the paint, right out of the can. Look at this delicious blue. You can mimic the lines that you had underneath with the paint, or you can do something completely different. Another thing you can do is get back out your drawing tools and go right over the top, especially where your paint's a little drier. Even like, don't do the Sharpie over the top of wet paint, but you can definitely do crayon right over that wet paint and carve it back in, give a whole different look. So colored pencils, you know, a white colored pencil is fun to go back in. More, yep, you can definitely change out your water. Get some clean water after all that color mixing. That means you're color mixing well. You have to change your water. So think about different lines, textures. Do what? Yeah. So you're really just playing around with adding, going back and forth between some paint, some oil pastels. Once your paint dries, you could add Sharpie over the top of your paint, but don't add it until it's really dry. Luckily with acrylic and tempera paint, it dries fairly fast, and watercolor. So if you're using those, you should be golden to start to use some others over the top. Move that paper around. Don't let it stay in one spot.
So I'm just mixing a little bit more color, feeling like maybe I should go back in to some spaces that are feeling really white and loud. So just kind of going back through and really kind of looking at my work to say, where can I put some more colors, or what colors to kind of allow certain areas to pop, certain areas to take a back seat. So which ones do I want, what lines and shapes do I want to pull forward? So just adding like maybe some black right on the outside here to really kind of put a little bit more depth. Really turn your piece. So be careful not to just paint one way on your artwork. Really keep turning it and rotating it as you go along. So again, this spot here really kind of needs some color. It's a little too bright of a white there. So just really kind of make sure you're treating each and every little corner of your work and deciding whether you want to keep it blank or whether you want to fill it in, whether it's too noisy or not noisy enough. So
really fill that page with as much line work, paint that you can. And if you need to take a break from this piece, you can always start a new piece. For those in class, you can come up and get a piece. You can always start again while this one dries. Maybe I'll go back in when this is really dry and I'll add more. So I'll take a moment and let that dry to the side, and maybe I'll start this time with just using paint to start and then do the opposite of what I just did. So again, you really don't think about, you're not trying to create anything realistic. You're just using the energy of the playfulness and exploration through paint, through color, thinking about what colors you're driven to, maybe choosing a color that normally you might not be driven to. So things that maybe that you don't tend to always go to, like this green, I probably wouldn't say that that's a green that I would probably see myself wearing or having around my house. But I love that green in nature. Like when I go for hikes, I'd love to see that green. This blue is more like my personality here. This is more me. Actually, this is my favorite, the blue right out of the jar of this blue. So I guess I do like to use just this one without mixing. But I could put a little black in there just so that, oops, that was a lot of black, just so that I do have not just raw paint right out of the jar. And try to get some colors that are like really strong darks and really strong lights in there. All my students here in class are changing out their water. You notice that I'm a dirty painter. I don't tend to change my water. I usually mix with a dirty brush. Just a really bad habit.
I do that too. That's why I completely forgot about the water.
But there's something too, like my colors tend to be a little bit more muted, more like I think like sometimes when you don't rinse your water, you tend to get a little bit of a palette that is a little bit more like something, that's not as bright, like what maybe you would see in the outdoors more when you are mixing all these different colors together. But each individual artwork here today should look very different and unique. We're not trying to mimic. We're just trying to, definitely trying to give you some inspiration. But it's great to see, like, whether you use bright colors, whether you have muted colors. Look at, I just accidentally made the best color right here. If you can tell, I'm a color lover. And it's fun to see, like, what happens when I put some color right over the top of a color, or what happens if I just paint that color right on the white? And how do those change, and what's the difference in those? Loving this orangish that I just found. Yum. And remember to turn that page so because like I started to see a little bit of a J, a backwards J. I don't want to see that. I'm going to change you up, buddy. I don't want you to look like anything. Draw a line right through that. Going in and adding some good white too is fun, just kind of getting some big splashes of white right in your piece. Well, that's not white anymore because I don't have a clean jar of clean water. But, going back in and adding some big blocks of color through lines, big blocks. You can see this piece is starting to dry, so I can start to do a little bit of my Sharpie work over the top of my drier pieces. Maybe following the lines that I created. can also draw little things inside of here if you do want to have something more realistic. And you can also get a pencil. Forgot to give my students here pencils. But you could start drawing back in if you want to go back into like doing something a little bit more realistic. You can definitely start to draw back in something that looks more realistic in here. Okay, this definitely isn't dry because it's just pulling paint up, but it's actually looking cool. So I'm going to keep going with that. You're doing good, Gundry. Thank you. You don't have crayons? That's okay if you don't have crayons. You can use oil pastels. I think I gave oil pastels in your kit too. Oh, you don't have paint? That's fine. Another great thing is like with oil pastels, you can, I mean, even with crayons, sort of, you can put a good layer of color down, another technique, and then, carve right back in it. With oil pastels, I think it does a little bit better of a job. So just think about layering and using using colors that you're drawn to, colors you're not drawn to. But if you use some good layering over the top, like this could have been colored pencil, that color, and then I put oil pastel over it. And then maybe I go back in with my colored pencil or my regular pencil and put some lines right into that. So you can really carve back in and make kind of this really depth layered look. So you're really just kind of playing around with adding how many layers and different textures, shapes, and colors. And again, working through your whole entire page. So don't forget, especially those of you at home, I can't see your work. So make sure when you're finished today at the end of class that you post an image up online.